Welcome to this explainer for the exact lesson, A Changing World mini-project video overview. I'm so glad you're here because today we are going to figure out exactly how late medieval crises, massive religious shifts, and global expansion completely rebuilt the foundations of human society into the early modern world. And we're going to do this by building a focused historical mini-project together. Just for your records, our official lesson ID is social-modern-social-unit-02-lesson-pack-08-A Changing World Mini Project Video Overview. Okay, let's get into it.
Here is our quick roadmap for the project. We'll cover 1. The guiding question, 2. A 3-part evidence board, 3. The cause and effect chain, 4. Drafting your project claim, 5. Testing a misconception, and 6. A transfer and reflection task.
Starting with step 1, the guiding question. You really can't just wander aimlessly through history, right? We need a compass.
So, our compass for today is this exact question. How did interconnected crises, religious transformations, and global expansion create the early modern world? This is absolutely crucial to keep in the back of your mind as we hunt for clues, because everything we talk about today is going to answer this specific question.
Moving on to step 2, the 3-part evidence board. Think of yourself as a detective, pinning clues up on a wall.
What's really cool is how naturally our evidence from OpenStax falls into 3 distinct domains. On the left, we've got the late medieval crisis, mainly the Black Death and the massive depopulation it caused. In the middle, there's religion, specifically the splintering of European Christianity during the Reformation. And on the right, exploration, which is that exploding web of Atlantic connections. Let's break these down one by one. To really grasp that first crises column, we have to talk about what was actually lost, which is feudalism. If you recall, feudalism was a super rigid system. You had a tiny elite group of hereditary landowners at the top, basically controlling the lives of peasant serfs who were tied to the land. But then the Black Death hits in the 14th century and causes just massive depopulation. This triggered a severe labor shortage. So suddenly the peasants who survived actually had tremendous leverage. They started leaving these feudal estates to go find better wages in cities or with other landlords. And just like that, the traditional dependent relationship began to fall apart.
Okay, looking at the religion column in the middle of our board, we hit the Protestant Reformation. Until the early 1500s, Western and Central Europe was pretty much totally united under the Roman Catholic Church. But people started getting frustrated. Critics argued the church had just become way too focused on wealth and political power, doing things like selling church offices or acting more like secular royalty than spiritual leaders. Well, that growing discontent sparked a full-blown religious revolution that completely shattered the Catholic Church's unified hold on Europe.
This quote right here brilliantly illustrates what primary source evidence actually looks like in practice. It's from Martin Luther's 95 Theses in 1517. He says, "Any truly repentant Christian has a right to full remission of penalty and guilt, even without indulgence letters." See, Luther was horrified that the church was selling indulgences, which were basically pieces of paper you could buy to reduce your time suffering in purgatory. Luther directly challenged this. He argued that forgiveness is about God and true repentance, not cash. And that single act of defiance became the spark for the entire Protestant movement.
Let's jump to step 3, the cause and effect chain. Because in history, it's not enough to just list facts, is it? We have to clearly link our causes, our evidence, and our consequences.
It's kind of like a domino effect. Notice how step 1, the plague, triggered a massive labor shortage. For step 2, we can actually prove this with concrete evidence. The elites panicked and passed strict new wage laws, which directly provoked massive peasant revolts. And finally, step 3, the ultimate consequence of all this chaos was the demise of the feudal system and the rise of far more centralized monarchies.
Let's zoom in on that evidence for just a second. Look at the year 1351. Over in England, they passed something called the Statute of Laborers. It was a law forcing any unemployed, able-bodied person under 60 to accept work at the old pre-plague wages. It was literally a desperate attempt by the elites to stop peasants from gaining social mobility, but it totally failed. People were furious about these restrictions, and peasants, merchants, and craftspeople launched massive revolts. The traditional power of the local nobles just couldn't hold up.
All right, step 4, drafting your project claim. We've got our evidence, we've linked our cause and effect, now we bring it all together into a single cohesive argument.
Here is our final evidence-based project claim.
The early modern world was forged by the collapse of feudal systems, the splintering of Christian unity, and the birth of a globally connected Atlantic network. This perfectly synthesizes all of our OpenStack sources into one really powerful historical argument. And if you notice, it directly answers our initial guiding question.
Of course, we back up that claim with specific historical details. First, the demographic crises led to serfs gaining social mobility. Second, changes in warfare, like the invention of the longbow, which basically made feudal cavalry totally obsolete, led to the rise of centralized monarchs. Third, the Reformation birthed entirely new Protestant sects, like the Anabaptists, who believed in adult baptism, or the Calvinists, who emphasized predestination. And fourth, expanding global connections peaked with Christopher Columbus crossing the Atlantic in 1492, which triggered an exploding web of trade and connections across the Atlantic world.
Moving to step 5, testing a misconception. Any fantastic historian tests their claim against common myths, so let's do exactly that. You know, it's super tempting to think of the late medieval period as this isolated dark age that has nothing to do with our modern reality. But the facts prove that's just a myth. In reality, the 14th century was defined by the early growth of globalization. Trans-regional exchange was expanding, and societies and economies were becoming deeply interconnected through trade, technology, and culture. These crises didn't end the world. They forced the world to adapt and connect on a whole new level.
And finally, step 6, the transfer and reflection task. History isn't just about memorizing old dates. It's about using the past to make sense of the present.
So, to wrap up Lesson ID Social Modern, Unit 02, Lesson Pack 08, a Changing World mini-project video overview, I want to leave you with this final reflection. How do these historical shifts still influence the structure of our modern world today? Think about it. We are living in a world defined by centralized nation-states, wildly diverse religious denominations, and deeply connected global supply chains. How did the fall of feudalism, those intense religious revolutions, and early global exploration set the stage for the exact reality you woke up in this morning? Take your time to reflect on that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.